Dobar dan svima. Ja sam Tanya Šplajt Brainović, izvršna sam direktorica i korporativnih komunikacija, a i ljudskih potencijala na razini grupe Addiko Grupa. Bazirana sam u Zagrebu, zapravo doktor sam ekologije, zaštite okoliša i društvenog poslovanja. Kako sam došla u banku, eto, karijera me dovela do tuda. Zapravo, moje izlaganje danas bit će fokusirano da vas s vama podijelimo kako gradimo raznolikost i inkluziju u korporativnu kulturu naše banke, ali kako ja nisam iz Hrvatske, molim vas oprostite mi, hrvatski mi nije prvi jezik, pa ću ja to vama lijepo ispričati na engleskom, ali svakako možemo imati diskusiju na hrvatskom i na engleskom jeziku nakon. Eto, krenimo. So I would like to tell you a story about how we move the needle. And in Addiko, we've been working for the last 4 years on our cultural transformation. Addiko as a brand has been on the Croatian market for the last 4 years. We're a bank that has gone through significant transformations. In these transformations, actually corporate culture, our values and our behaviors, and more specifically leadership behaviors, have been, I would say, a fundamental pillar of how we're running the transformation. So what I'll be showing you today is group data. The group works in Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Serbia. And Group HR and Group Corporation Corporate Communications are based here in Croatia. So we provide services to all of the other banks. From that perspective, what I would like you to take away is not the fact that we've moved the needle, but the amount of effort that it takes to move that needle. And I speak to you as a bank that is transforming into digital, that is, I would say, continually looking to be competitive in a very diverse market, but equally so, actually the effort when you are a small or medium-sized organization is, I would say, double or triple than those big organizations in which you have probably a lot more of a talent base from which you can pull. So I'd like to start with this slide. This is the Eurostat slide for 2021. If you want to measure gender diversity in the workplace, you start with measuring the percentage of women in managerial roles. And Eurostat for our 27 EU countries has segmented into 3 parts. The percentage of women who are managers, the percentage of women who are in managing boards, and the percentage of women who are in executive, that is, supervisory board roles. This was the first slide that we came to our management board with, and this is the slide that our story starts with. We couldn't find banking data, so we used stock-listed organizations across the EU as our benchmark from which to start the dialogue. Today in 21, women represent 37% of managers across the EU. In Addiko, at the group level, our managers are a 50-50 split. We've actually exceeded. In Croatia, 53% of our B1 managers, when I say B1, I mean that level of management under the board, is at 53%. At the group level, we're at 51%. When we talk about board membership, 28% of women represent board members across the EU in stock-listed companies. In Addiko, we are at 18.2%. When we started this journey, it was 18.2%. So we have not moved in that direction. However, when we look at our supervisory boards, at the EU level, supervisory board representation for women is at 18%. When we started our journey, for us in the group, it was at 20%. Today, we've exceeded the 30% tipping mark, so we've achieved 31.4%. So my point here is that I'm hoping that you'll all have the same vision as I have, and that vision is that we get together in 3 to 5 years' time, and that these numbers here are much closer to 50%. And I'm talking about in Croatia, in the banking sector, and across the EU. Now, what I will be talking about is actually the effort that it takes to move that needle, because it's not to be underestimated. There's a role that women have to play once you get to the board, and there's a role that we have, I would say, as a responsibility to bring these topics onto the agenda on board discussions. I've been in HR for 10 years, and I've done a lot of cultural and organizational transformations. And if I was to tell you what is the journey in building a workplace in which diversity and inclusion is absolutely part of your daily life, in all honesty, it takes 3 to 4 years. And if I was to tell you that we're complete with our journey, we are not. We're about halfway there. And in those 2 years that we've been, I would say, actively building a culture, the first step was to really set the foundations and set the strategy. And then the second step was to bring it to life, and so that people understand it, see it, and live it in their daily processes. So right now, I would like to tell you the story about the last 2 years, what we've done from the strategic and what we've done from the perspective of bringing it to life. Like I said, the journey started in May of 2018 when we came to the group supervisory board, knowing that effective January 1st, 2019, the European Banking Agency would actually expect all banks in the EU to have a diversity policy, a strategy, and a target. And depending on what country you're in, you either had to set diversity targets or you had to set a quota. And in the case of our region, in the case of Slovenia, Croatia, and Austria, we had targets to work towards. Now I say this because the discussion started in May 2018, but the final outcome of our strategy and the negotiation of the targets that would be set lasted 9 months. And the reason I say this is because the targets that were set held the supervisory board and the management board accountable for achieving them. And as per the EBA guidelines, the big focus in the EU is gender representation. Of course, diversity has many different faces, and for us, we identified it as gender diversity, age diversity, national diversity, religious diversity, sexual orientation, and we put a special focus on actually parenthood. Mothers going off to maternity leave, fathers going on paternal leave. Diversity isn't something that is copy-paste. For example, we don't have an Afro-American population in the geography of our bank. Of course we respect it, of course we're there to support it, but it's not something that resounds to our employees, it's not something that resounds to the geography that we are in. On the other hand, national identity, religious diversity, gender, age, the new generations that are coming in, these are topics that at this starting point in our journey are things that people resound to, people understand. So from this perspective, we built our strategy. A 9-month negotiation dialogue in setting the policy, setting the framework, setting the target. The target that we came out with effective January 1st, in my view, was quite conservative. The objective was to identify and promote 1 female into a management board position, and identify and promote 1 female into a supervisory board position at the group level. At the same time, what was requested is that we also set a gender target for the males in the span of diversity. So for our male population, the objective was identify 1 male, that would be a ready now successor for a board position, and 1 male, that would be a ready now successor for a supervisory position. When I looked at it then, I thought, this is really not an ambitious target. This is actually a check-the-box story. And after 9 months of dialogue and discussion, I thought, okay, at least we have a starting point. So today what I can say is, yes, we have exceeded our target. So not only did we identify and promote 1 woman, we now have a talent pool of 3 women that we see as future board members. From our supervisory perspective, not only did we promote 1 woman into the supervisory board, we actually identified and promoted 5. But, and that's a but, the same thing was on the male side. So yes, we identified not 1 ready now male, we identified 4 of them. From the supervisory board perspective, we didn't, we of course identified 1 male, but actually we identified 7 of them. And so what we quickly realized is, yes, it was good that we set that target at that point in time, because now I can go back to my management board and my supervisory board and say, hi, we set a target and we achieved it. So please, we actually overachieved it. So now can we actually start setting targets which are furtherly ambitious? In addition to that, looking back, I'm also okay with the fact that we set this small target. Why? Because the amount of change and effort and focus that took to achieve what we did was, equivalent to an entire team working at this. And therefore, from the perspective of when I look at these numbers and I say, okay, so we've built our B1 talent pool. We've moved that from 45 to 51. We've actually built our supervisory pool. We've moved the needle from where we were at 20% to above 30%. But we haven't moved the needle at the management board level, and we need to understand why. So we started doing deep dives of the numbers, number crunching. I mean, I'm not a banker, I am an adopted banker, thank you very much for adopting me. But I think bankers are walking calculators, they think in numbers. And so we started data crunching, and we started going to every supervisory board and every management board. This is the percent of men to women in your supervisory board, in your management board, in your entire bank. And then we did something that caused a lot of dialogue. We analyzed salaries. We took the salaries of all the board members across the group, looking for gender differences. Is there a gap? And to our great relief, and also confirmation, there wasn't a gap. So we were great there. But what happened when we looked at the B1 population, so these are our future board members, regardless of gender, we saw very interesting results. So when we compared B1s in Slovenia to Croatia, we actually saw that the females had a higher average salary than the males. That was Slovenia, yeah. In Croatia, it was an equal story. So the average salary of our B1s, male and female, was equal. That was also a good story. But then we went to the remaining countries, and that's where we saw a difference that varied from approximately 10% to approximately 30%. And this journey around the evaluation of our salaries was an interesting journey because we were heavily challenged on the credibility of the data, on the assumptions made, on the methodology. Like I said, it was a 9-month discussion where we were able to convince our managing bodies, first of all, of the data that was being presented, of the methodology that we were using, and that the facts were true. And some of the discussions, I remember a comment stating, we don't discriminate against women. Why are we creating so much bureaucracy? Another discussion was, why are you presenting this data in this way? Is this really business critical at this point in time? And this is the part where I have to say, I'm really glad we had EBA as a framework, because at that point in my board, I had all men. But in addition to that, it was my supervisory board that was really supporting the move towards it. And so by being able to say, effective January 1st, we need this, it was at least a topic that we were able to put on the table. So then we realized that after a year and a half of actually setting up the framework, it was time to bring it to life. And what we agreed is that we would take a do and then tell approach. We didn't want to go around saying, hey, we're great, we're, diversity and inclusion is the story, when I really wanted to make sure that this is an organization where it is valid. So we worked out with the supervisory board that there would be 6 initiatives that would be implemented in the following 2 years in order to bring it to life. So these 6 initiatives were, first of all, we implemented talent KPIs, key people in key positions, percentage of ready now, ready 1, ready 2 board members that can be promoted. And then 6 months after, we added the gender topic. What is the percentage of women who are ready now, ready 1? What is the gender, what is your talent pool, and what percentage of them are women to men? We integrated that into the performance cycle. So in quarter 1 and quarter 2 of every year, when you evaluate the performance evaluation and you come out with your quantification of bonuses, we took a look, integrated those KPIs in, and started looking at the percentage of women who got exceeds expectations, the percentage of women that got meets expectations versus their peers. What came out was a balanced evaluation. So that was also an important checkpoint for us. In addition, we looked at the paid out bonuses, males versus females, B1's management boards. It was pretty good here too. So with the data and continually coming back to the supervisory boards with numbers and clear recommendations on how we could improve it or where we're strong and where we need focus, was one way in which we put the fish on the table and kept cooking, I would put it that way. What we did is we brought in all of our managing directors. So these are people that sit in, actually across our group, mostly in Austria, who report to the group management board, and they became our ambassadors of diversity. So these kind of, I would say this presentation and this kind of information is what we share with them every 12 to 18 months. We get their onboarding, they co-create the initiatives with us, and they co-create the targets with us. And so now, after 3 years of doing this, they are my greatest sponsors, and actually, these are my next Ready Now board members. In addition, we launched mentoring. We looked at our entire, and revamped our entire leadership development. When we launched it, there wasn't training that we could afford that was about promoting leadership and development in the sense of diversity. And so we took our own approach to it. We went through the entire curriculum and revamped the key messages that every manager in the organization has to go through. Addiko Leader 1, Addiko Leader 2, and so forth, in which what they are taught is, as a leader, collaboration is number one. You have to walk the talk in the values of the organization, which also means supporting diversity and inclusion. And in that story, there's a key message, which is diversity of thought. As a leader, you need to have this skill set, which is described as diversity of thought. Can you bring diverse people, very different people, into the table, different nationalities, different religions, different ages, and create a high-performance team? And this is where we are today. We're working on it. We're going for it. Right now, we're launching a series of surveys, preparing for certification. In Croatia, there's a certification called MAMForce, which will be followed by DADForce. It's a diversity and inclusion audit in which you're benchmarked looking at your processes and practices versus best practices. And I believe that going through such audits is an important part of raising awareness and helping you to identify what, or as an organization, what you can do and how you can improve it. I'd like to take a minute to talk about mentoring. In the midst of COVID last year, in the midst of, I would say, budget cuts for any kind of leadership development, we launched our mentoring program in which we wanted to engage our management board members. We have an amazing set of 25 board members who have actually, each one of them, a good 20 years of experience. So the commitment from all the board members is that they would be the mentors, and we wanted quality and not quantity. So HR worked with all the leaders to identify, and actually our objective was to find 25 mentors, and it would be mentoring with purpose. So looking at their person's development plan, what is the topic? You have 3 to 5 months, you link them to the board member who's an expert in this, a lot of background work to make it work. Well, just 2 weeks ago when I was compiling the information, I realized actually we planted a seed and we have an amazing garden. So by the end of this year, the target is to have all of the board members at the group participating as mentors. 80% of them have either completed it or are in progress. Where I thought we would have 25 mentoring programs, we already have 122. And when we've looked at the people that have applied and have been included, this has actually become a key tool with which we are identifying and empowering our female leaders in the future. So on that note, actually the feedback from the organization is really positive. I mean, one of the quotes here is, our meeting sessions are something I will cherish forever. I don't think a man would ever write something like that. On the other hand, I am so happy we have set up the mentoring program. Being connected to others is a way that makes me proud. Yeah, I don't think the "so" would also come from perhaps one of our, not yet, that is, one of our male members of the board. But as time has progressed, what we do see is an absolute change in the, I would say, the proactivity and in the awareness from our current management board members and our supervisory board members on this topic and on the awareness that they have to be part of this story. Because looking at the background, in the last 3 years, there was probably 2 or 3 members of the supervisory board that were helping us to push this along. And what has happened now is that now I have, as you saw, 80% of my management board actively participating. And this is the story about moving the needle. It's about actually getting people personally engaged to make that change. So in this journey of ours, I would say there was 5 hard facts and 5 learnings that we'll take forward and I wanted to share with you. They're pretty bold statements, so I apologize in this story, but this is how we see it. First of all, female bench strength is low. For all the board member recruitments that I've done in my banking career, it's basically 1 female to 4 males as ready now candidates. It may be 0 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 3, but that's basically the ballpark in which we're working. So as a medium-sized organization, I definitely have to make sure that we, as an organization, are planning our talent pool. The lesson number 2, if we rush, we hire male. It's a bold statement, but if you look at the talent pool, if you look at the amount of females available in the Croatian market, I'm looking now at the CEE market, who are ready to take a board role, this is our story. And as HR, I always have the business coming to me and saying, I need a person now. And then I usually say, wait, I gotta take them out of my pocket. But the point being, when we look for board members, of course there is no excuse. There is no rush if you know someone is going into retirement. But if someone has left due to a promotion, leaving to another organization, due to personal reasons, then you do have a crunch in time. And if you give yourself a very short period of time to fill a board member role, you will find a male candidate. And therefore, what I want to raise as a point of awareness, if you are a board member, or if you are, and you hear this message, please take this into account. You have to take the time and make the space to find those female candidates who can take board roles. We could really have a separate discussion on why we don't have them, but the confidence that I have going forward is that we are now identifying and very strategically working with those potentials to be those future board members. Lesson 3, what happens if you don't have diversity at the board? So what happens if you have a supervisory board where you have no females yet? That was kind of our case, actually it was our case, in May 2018. I had 9 supervisory board and management board members and 1 female. And what you have to do is you have to find those people who resound with this topic, who will support you. It was a lot about going and aligning before any supervisory board meeting, coming out with the agenda, with the key messages, and actually pre-aligning that they will speak up at the meetings in order to call me back to the meetings in the future. And it wasn't, I thought, okay, I'm going to leverage the fact that we do have a female. And what I realized is that it's not fair to judge because I had 9 males. That was also my stereotype. We specifically went to speak to each one of our management board members and supervisory board members, really to identify who are those people that are going to support us in this journey. And it was that group that pushed it forward. So really, on one hand, if you are a member of the management board or the supervisory board, please empower your HR to keep coming back to you and please keep asking these questions. On the other hand, just because we're female does not mean we're actually supporting the diversity move. I spoke to some of our supervisory board members who are now females, and I asked them, you'd be such an amazing mentor and inspiration to many of our women. Could you share some of your experience? And one of our senior leaders said, I had the good luck in life of never recognizing that I was a male in the finance community. I always had a good boss who treated me well and respected me, and I was always very eager to learn. I thought, okay, thank you. I'm going to share that message. And this is where the idea came out about mentoring and about the fact that it's not only a women's network that has to be there. We need to work within the organization to build an organization of inclusion. So we're still struggling with this. I think you speak to any HRD and they'll say, I'm not sure how to deal with this. Unconscious bias. So the stereotypes, we all have them. I mean, it's not a Croatian thing, it's not a women's thing, a man's thing. But I think in the business world, as a female, we are often confronted with it. I remember one time I was going to Vienna, it was 7 p.m. in the evening, and my peer said to me, "You're going to Vienna now?" I said, "Yeah." "What does your husband say about that?" I said, "Well, he supports my career, and if he didn't, he wouldn't be my husband." And I actually took it very offensively. And as we've implemented and started talking about diversity and inclusion, I came back to him and I said, "You know, I was really upset with your comment." And he said, "Really?" Because I was wondering how you balance it, and how do you deal with the complexity of it, and how do you guys deal with it as from a relationship perspective? And then I thought, okay, I don't know if you're actually very conservative in your views. I just assumed you were, and I took it as an attack. But on the other hand, I'm constantly getting these kind of comments, and I would actually rather attack back than assume that, you know. But that's where I stopped myself, and I said, unconscious bias, right. And so the story around unconscious bias is still very much there. We still have it when people go on maternity leave and on paternal leave. Sometimes I look at the men that are going on paternal leave, and it's equally as hard for them to actually be on paternal leave, because they actually have the pressure in this industry of almost being perceived as weak, or as being, you know, why on earth are you doing that? Why didn't you get your wife to do that? So it's still very present in the organization, and that's why we said, okay, if we do man force, then we got to do dad force too, because they're part of the team as well, and they're part of our story. And perhaps before I move to this final slide, what I wanted to say is the new generations that are coming in, they're really interesting. I mean, they're coming. So we can look at them and say they're weird, they're strange, they're different, they're lazy, they have a different view on life. But they're part of our future. They are here. And what we've started doing is having these workshops with our young generations to understand how they view the organization, what can change, how do they view diversity and inclusion. And I'm thinking, you know, I've got teenage daughters who tell me, you know, "Mommy, clothing is gender neutral, and Mommy, it's totally okay to have friends of different genders." And this is all very new to me. I'm head of HR, I'm supposed to know this stuff, but this is all very new to me. And I've realized that our new generations are a great source of insight on what we can do to build a diverse and inclusive workforce. And then finally, positive pulls positive. I mentioned mentoring, where we wanted to start small, focus on quality. What I found out in the last 2 weeks is that our bank in Serbia has joined up with the UNDP, and they're starting an entire women's empowerment project with the UNDP about women in the bank. Our bank in Sarajevo has linked up with Deloitte, and they've launched a countrywide mentoring program for that country of females in different industries. And that's where I just thought, you know, actually positive does pull positive. And what I can say is, yes, we've moved the needle. Yes, we still have a lot of work ahead of us. Yes, we've learned a lot. And in this story, I think we just have to, as much as possible, put the fish on the table, talk about it in a very honest and frank way in order to make that progress going forward. So going back to my vision at the start, I really hope that in 3 to 5 years' time, these numbers will confirm that positive does pull positive, and that our gender equality in the workplace will continue to improve. So thank you very much for your time.